organizing. We are so glad for Dr. Ward to join us. And, you know, lest you think this is all about academics coming together, we also have yet another artist. We want to introduce Muse. She also goes by Ebony Johnson. She is from Mississippi, moved to the Valley of the Sun 10 years ago and has had her hand in a little bit of everything related to youth, to Black women's liberation, racial justice, HBCU, which are the historically Black colleges and universities advocacy, educating, volunteering with teen girls of color, and all things arts related. So we very much want to welcome Muse in. And of course, the woman who inspired this conversation is Theresia Reynolds. She is a native to Arizona. She grew up in South Phoenix, and having gone through years of a life-threatening sickness called pseudotumor cerebri, she endured periods of lost eyesight and decreased mobility as a young woman. So from her healing has come a commitment to using her artwork to inspire hope, faith, love. She consistently uses her talents as an artist, singer, poet to raise funds to free individuals from sex trafficking via her nonprofit called Love to Life. Her signature on all paintings, SDG, stands for Soli Deo Gloria, meaning glory for God, alone to reflect her belief that all honor ultimately belongs to God. Now, on that front, the one thing that you may not know about Theresia is that she has these aren't words on the page. She really has a very deep spiritual religious practice. And so we are going to see Theresia a little bit further in to our conversation tonight. And so we're going to welcome her in a little bit more about 6:30. And at that point, she's going to come in to join the conversation and also to share her fantastic art for all of us to see and to also discuss. So at this point, I'm going to see if I know we're running into a little bit of some technical issues, and I just want to see if we have Dr. Ward on, Muse on, if we can turn on our cameras, and if we have Dr. Sis on, Reverend Dr. Sis.
I'm on and I'm working. I think you can hear me.
We can hear you, yes.
Excellent. You'll be able to see me in just a moment.
Excellent.
I think that does it. Okay.
That was pretty super, sis, Reverend sis.
I am a product of ASU.
Well, as our moderator tonight, do you want to take it away?
Certainly. I am so excited to be here. We are grateful for those welcoming remarks and lovely introductions. We are here to talk about and discuss not only the Black speculative arts movement, creator spaces, but how it comes alive and the way in which it comes alive through engaging social issues, through engaging concerns of representation and social justice. And so what I'd like to do is kind of set the context of what is Afrofuturism and the landscape. And so just to begin, the landscape of speculative fiction, art, and the notion of Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is a heuristic or a possibility of thinking of the way in which people from the African diaspora, and I use that term largely, both continental and around the diaspora, as broadly as we can think, has been engaging, I would say, over the last 10 years in intentionally crafting art, music, which again has always been present, but intentionally crafting these kinds of discourse to say, not only are we part of the past, but we are also part of the future. It's what John Jennings calls Sankofa narration. It's telling our story through time, past, present, and future. And then in examining the ways in which we have possibilities to imagine ourselves present in the future. So that's just a truncated version of Afrofuturism. It crosses all genres of art, music, theater, film, comics, anime, and when you begin to think about the social ramifications of bringing those elements to life and the way in which they operate in society, operate in the lives of people of color, particularly of Black folk, and the spaces that are so important. It's what I call liminal space which affirms our African heritage, our African identity, and our capacity to imagine a new world. And so just to sum up the landscape, and so when we're talking about superheroes and comics, yes, that's one aspect of Black speculative arts. Superheroes and comics, and what does it look like to have a superhero that looks like you? A superhero that you may have grown up with. Superheroes from our social and cultural history that we can acknowledge have superpowers that we could not have imagined, 20, 30, 40 years before their existence. And so tonight we're also going to talk about real superheroes and their impact on society. Superheroes throughout history, such as Fannie Lou Hamer. We often, have created a hero, of course, out of Martin Luther King. And these are just some of those, names we pull out of a hat, but we know that there are layers of rich history and the African diaspora, Kwame Nkrumah, Nanny Burroughs. So the list can go on. But one of the things that we're going to talk about, particularly in this artist context of Therosia's what we call cultural production, is those kinds of interfacing of superhero comics, imaginings, and real life superheroes and their impact on our culture and on the power of our Blackness. And so I just want to begin to carve that out. And then we'll talk also about this notion of sacred space, because we are talking about the intersection of faith. You see my background is the Interfaith Center here at Stanford, and where faith comes together. And so for us as Black folk, faith for me happened on Sundays, yes, whether I was in my father's tradition as a Muslim or my mother's tradition as a Black Baptist. Faith for me happened on Sunday, but it happened differently. Because I came from an interfaith background, it happened at dinner time. It happened when that sacred space of community rose up, and there was an Uncle Joe outside and an Aunt Sally Mae on the porch and a Big Mama. Those were Sunday dinners where soul food created a sacred cultural space. And that sacred cultural space is what we think of when we think of soul food, food for the soul. I always like to tell, from the Christian context, a story of my little boy. When he was about 5 or 6, we were out and we were getting some food. And I said, well, we have a long way before we get home. It'll be about 2 hours. Let's get a little soul food, a little seafood, a little something. And he was 5 or 6, and he was raised in the church and in a faith community. And I said, he said the same thing. And I said, what is seafood? He looked at me like I was crazy. He knew, I know what seafood is. We eat seafood all the time. And I said to him, okay, so what is soul food? And he had a look of aghast on his face. He said, Mommy, it's the juice and cracker we get on Sunday. That's soul food. And for him, he could not disconnect the soul food of Sunday dinner, the soul food of community, with the sacred sacrament of communion. That was also soul food. And so today, as we talk about the conflation, the intersections of soul food, social justice, and superheroes, I want you to remember those little moments and those markers as we talk about Black space and Black culture. So now I'm going to ask that our speakers come to bear as well. At 6:30, I don't know if I'm supposed to continue to talk till 6:30. I'm not sure. I thought I was going to introduce. What I'd like to do is have our speakers, Dr. Mako Fitzward, Muse. I want to call her Muse by her Muse name, her artist name. Um, uh, and you've already been introduced. I know Therosi, Dr. De Mesa. Are you?
Yes, Dr. Sakina, you can engage the panelists who are here, and then
Yeah.
the artist, when Therosia arrives, then we'll move into that part. So go ahead with the agenda.
All right, excellent. And so at this point, let's wrestle with these things that I've laid out on the landscape. Dr. Mako and the other panelists, if you will join us now, take off your mute and engage us. Who would like to jump in? Particularly when we're talking about the landscape and what does it mean to engage in this landscape for American audiences?
I think when we're talking about, and I love the way you set the tone, Dr. Sis, around the intersection of it, the oftentimes not non-intentional spiritual pieces that go into it, whether you're a practicing, religious person or not. You just so happen to trip into it culturally because the spiritual portion of our existence is so heavy in our culture, so that you can't help but to reverence something bigger than you, whether it's a person, place, or a thing. So I that layout was absolutely beautiful. As we're coming into the soul food and superheroes, growing up, I'm from the backwoods of Mississippi. So grew up with my great grandparents, and there were greens growing in the backyard, and you had clothes on the line, and I'm very much up to date, but I grew up very, very, very old school. And so soul food, coming to Phoenix, people just have this very in a box kind of idea what soul food is. And it's just fried chicken and mac and cheese and the greens and the cornbread. But we had succotash, we had zucchini dressing, we had, of course, cabbage, and we had black eyed peas and purple whole peas and salads and a good tomato, cucumber, onion salad, where it was majority vegetables versus the consumption of meat. And so there's so many elements to soul food that are misconstrued as is the superhero, right? And so it may present a certain way, it may exude a certain energy, but there's so many, like an onion, there's so many layers to the whole thing before you're able to actually get a good grasp around what it is that you're experiencing. And so I think for America, I don't know how long we got for that, but for America, I think it's great to offer up a stark contrast to what the assumptions are around soul food, number one, and then superheroes. Both have their flaws, but both are very, very huge in their contributions that they make. Even with speaking of the differences of a superhero, sometimes as a Black people, as Black women, I know especially, we're assumed to be superhuman. And we live and breathe like everybody else. And so I'm happy to have this conversation so that we can fully, thoroughly get into the nitty gritty of it all.
I can't wait to come back to this piece about the strong Black woman and the ways in which we are superheroes, even when we don't meet this iconic false image of the strong Black woman. And I always say the strong Black woman's dead, but we'll come back to that. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Dr. Mako Fitzward.
Thank you. Well, I want to pick up on the piece about Black women and really go back to thinking about, I don't necessarily want to think about it in the context of the origins of speculative fiction with regards to the African-American literary tradition, but I do want to talk about the role of Black women in really deepening the use of speculative fiction in social justice work and movement work. In particular, some of the work that I've been doing more recently, my work is rooted in urban cultural movement, specifically hip hop, and the ways in which hip hop artists help to imagine a world, particularly hip hop artists who are very much embedded in their local communities, really strive to imagine a different kind of world where liberation and justice are possible. And so one of the individuals who I've been really inspired by throughout the course of my career, and more recently in some of my writing on visionary fiction, is rapper, poet, and now scholar Walida Imarisha, who's one of the co-authors of the collection Octavia's Brood. And Imarisha talks about, she uses the phrase visionary fiction, and she talks about visionary fiction as being at the intersection of fantastical art and social change. And it really functions as a lens through which we begin to explore the creative works of Black writers, Black artists, for the purpose of building what she calls new just futures, right? And this is really a form of imaginative storytelling that explores alternative world making, right, as a form of active liberation and resistance, right? And this has always been central to the African American literary tradition, and more specifically Black women's literature, right? And the role of a writer like Octavia Butler in science fiction writing as, again, offering up the conceptual possibilities for us to envision and embody a vision of liberation and freedom. And I think that it has always been Black women who have led the charge, both in terms of, traditional, conventional, on the ground, direct action social movement work, and now more recently, thinking about the intersection of art and activism. And so, as we sort of welcome Terosia into the conversation, I think it's so important for us to center the cultural production, to see her as a culture worker, to see her as someone whose art is transforming the way that we think about our lives and the way that we think about the ways that we show up as Black women. To your point, Dr. Sis, while we might be fighting that trope of Black women as super women, right? We do have Black girl magic. There is a genesis. There is something very spiritually and psychologically innate when we use that phrase Black girl magic, that is so deeply and profoundly connected to arts and art practice. And so I'm very excited to dig deeper into your artist practice and your artist way, and how this kind of deep legacy of Black girl magic, which is not new generationally, right? Black girl magic has a very, very, very long socio-historical trajectory, Afro-diasporic trajectory. So yeah, I'll end there.
Thank you, and I think you are perfect and right on time as our artist arrives. Terosia, we are so glad to have you here. Terosia. It's the Greek that I love your name. So I have to just say it out loud. And that's another thing that I do. I say it out loud. And so it is so wonderful to have you here. It is so wonderful to be in conversation today. We have just kind of laid out the landscape about the imaginings, the intersections of soul food, the intersection of community and the importance of the social concept and social justice aspects of not only your work, but of art that is laying out the Black imaginary. So welcome, and we're glad you're here. We're honored to be with you.
Thank you, Dr. Sis. Thank you, Dr. Mako. Hi, Muse. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Dr. Neal. Thank you for having me this evening. I was listening is a part of my spiritual practice as a Messianic Jew. We believe the day begins at night. So at 6 o'clock, we pray every day. And I shut the world out, and I at least give God the first minutes of the day, because it's important to me to keep him first in everything I do. And my work flows from a place of trying to allow him to be the center of my focus, because even social justice is at the heart of God, because all of us are a reflection of him, and any of us that are disrespected is disrespecting his image.
Thank you. I mean, that really speaks to this interface of where you are in your work and the importance of faith and spirituality and how that informs your work. Could you say a little bit more about how that arises when you think about the social justice aspect of your work and faith?
Well, for my faith and my social justice, so one of the things that happened, I'm not a Jew by birth. I'm one who was adopted into the faith. And one of my spiritual fathers was a Messianic rabbi. And he would always talk about the Imago Dei, the image of God in all of humanity, and how it is important to recognize that when God created male and female, he created them both reflecting his image. He created the cultures all reflecting his image, each having unique gifts and unique aspects of him. There is something, I forget the exact scripture, that speaks of the multi-prismatic nature of God, that in every way you turn, when you get to the throne room and there's the seraphims going around singing holy, 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 it's because they've seen a new version of the prismatic nature and beauty of God. And you see him in these beautiful Black bodies, in these beautiful female frames. There is God in each one of those. There is this aspect of him that you can only reach by honoring each vessel you come in contact with. And so my work flows first from honor and second from love, because if I honor the vessel, if I honor the person, then I get access to see my God through them.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. And so in this particular rendering and collection of work that we are here talking about soul food and superheroes, clearly having a deep faith interface. Can you talk a little bit about this particular inspiration for your art? One of the particularity piece or of your exhibit.
Okay, so it started about 4 years ago. That's the funny part. I started dreaming this show 4 years ago. And when I started dreaming it, it started with the idea that Martin Luther King died believing most people hated him. This was a man of great faith. This was a man of great love. This was a man of great humility and conscious, not just for Black people, not just for people of color, but for all people. He wanted all humanity to have life and love and freedom and liberty. And he died with a 33% approval rating. And at the time of his death, after he was assassinated, people said in about 35%, he brought it on himself. That's painful to hear, because now we have a holiday, we celebrate his birthday, we quote him when we talk about peace and how to get ahead and all of these things. And there is an absolute skip of the disrespect that was shown to him in his life. There's this disavowalment of what we really owed him in life. And if my work centers on honor, there are still social justice leaders that in the past and in our current present that are experiencing this disrespect. And it's our job to say, if I want to honor people who are doing this work on my behalf, not just her behalf, his behalf, their behalf, it's mine. I owe them the very least is to say thank you.
Mhm.
And I realized they're fighting supervillain level supervillain level enemies, getting death threats, being abused in some ugly ways that we won't even go into right now. And where are the voices that are just as loud as the disrespect? Where are the voices saying, no, they are not alone? We are with them. I will stand on that lawn with them. I will go to that ballot with them. They are not alone. Because that's why the disrespect can be so loud. Because the assumption is that these people are alone. They are dissenters rather than they represent the majority. So if we would have social justice be more than a hashtag or more than a momentary trend or movement, we must stand together. We must show a united front. We must speak up for those who are speaking up for us. We must make them realize that if you take out one more of ours, this will not be a quiet, we will look for the person who did it, not for vengeance, but for justice. It won't be, oh, well, just another leader gone and we're crying and we have a hashtag, but we will seek justice. We loved this person. And even in life, we love this person. And they should hear it. And those who would come against them should hear it as well.
One of the phrases that many of our ancestors have said over and over is to give me my flowers while I'm still alive.
That part.
That part. and what you're articulating in the context and landscaping of the Black and Imaginary is the conflation and to quote King, the urgency of now. All right. So the urgency of honoring them, even if we have to reimagine them in the context of a superhero, but the urgency of now, honoring their work in the now, so that in their living, which is a womanist ethic of lived experience in the now, in their living, they know that they are embraced, loved, respected, and honored.
Yes, definitely.
Their work is not just a sense of survival, but thriving. Right?
Exactly.
And so I know that we want to look at some of your art. Dr. Mako, your work that really hinges on this, also a womanist voice, clearly. So I know that well, because I was one of your students. I'm going to say it out loud. Could you share a bit about this in the now?
Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, as someone who studies art and art movements and is very much in community with artists, I often find that we don't spend, by we, I mean academics, we often don't spend enough time engaging the product, the work itself, right? We might talk about the impact of the work, or we might attempt to, particularly in more sort of present the sort of post-Renaissance of Black Lives Matter, circa 2020. I think folks are looking for representative figures to attach to without really getting deep in, as DJ scholar Denise always says, you got to get in the crates, you got to get deep into the work. And so I spent quite a bit of time I love just staring at pieces of art, trying to make sense of, and I'm always curious about the artist's vision. And I know that's not a question that a lot of artists like to answer. Like, talk about your vision. What were you thinking about when you put this here and you put this there? And so, you know, I'm just really fascinated. And I want to pose the question to Terosia. Why Doctor Who and Stacey Abrams? Because I find that to be, as someone who grew up, I didn't grow up watching comic books or reading comic books, but I grew up with comic book movies. And so the sort of visual, the sort of cinematic interpretation of comics was kind of that was my jam. And so, you know, I was just so fascinated. Also because as a television show, there's a lot of sort of revolutionary elements around the production of Doctor Who, and sort of the presence of Black women in that television series. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you saw as the intersection or the connection, the connective tissue between a character like Doctor Who and our contemporary superhero, Stacey Abrams.
Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. I actually do like answering these questions. So that's the piece over there. Nothing strange about Stacey's Black girl magic. It's actually Doctor Strange that she is reimagined.
Thank you for saying that, Doctor Strange. I'm so sorry, Doctor Strange. Yes.
And when you study, I'm a huge comic book fan. I have so many comic book cards from like 1991 and 1993. I'm an anime fan. But I'm also a Stan Lee fan. And Stan Lee started this, but he did it in reverse. He wanted people who were non-people of color to be able to see the civil rights activists as the superheroes that they were. So he reimagined Martin Luther King as Professor Xavier and Malcolm X as Magneto. T'Challa comes from his study of the Black Panther movement, the Black Panther Party movement. For me, painting Stacey as Doctor Strange was from my study. I love Doctor Strange in the concept that first off, the character is totally arrogant. So, and he takes this, loss in his career. He's a doctor, he's a surgeon, he's really big time according to a lot of people. He's upper echelon. And he loses his ability to be a surgeon. He loses his hands. Hi to all my comic book nerds in the comments. I see you. And through this process of coming to a humbling place, he pivots into this is his own spiritual practice and becomes the background character that is the source of wind for so many other characters. He's one of the background characters in Spider-Man story, background characters of Thor story, background character of the Avengers. He's in so many backgrounds helping get wins where he had losses. When we look at Stacey Abrams, she was a gubernatorial candidate for Georgia. Dr. Strange is a tactician. Stacey Abrams is a tactician. She lost the gubernatorial candidacy. She petitioned for it. She lost. There was so many questions of whether she lost fairly or not, which we won't go into tonight. But the point is, she takes that loss and pivots into being the background for so many other wins. Warnock, Biden, and countless others that we can't even discuss. We'll run out of time. And the voter suppression aspects that she stands against. There are so many other wins that she becomes a part of, and her humility in that space of being willing to stand in the background and say, it's not about me getting a win, it's about us getting a win. And that Black girl magic that she brought to the 2020 election, the reason I titled it, There's Nothing Strange About Stacey's Black Girl Magic, is in this show, I wanted to reference the fact that Black people of color have been told our whole life, you have to work 10 times harder, 8 times harder, 3 times harder than our counterparts just to get ahead. And so excellence has become a way of life. It's not our flex, it's our survival.
And go ahead.
That's who she is, because that's who we are. Ubuntu. Sorry.
To actually, that's where exactly I was taking you, this notion of collective wins. You talked about her humility, and must I say, she's currently running again for governor.
Yes.
$22 a month. Little commercial there. Go ahead and hit click. And so this collective, thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
And so when we see this, you peeled back a little bit of the layers of the philosophy of who Dr. Strange was, but also this notion of how eventually she'll get her spotlight. Now, we know that eventually Dr. Strange will get his solo film. And so this combination of these two, this capacity to bring those together, can you talk a little bit more about this importance of how we need to support our current social rights movements and individuals such as a Stacey Abrams?
Yeah, there is this, like I said, the construct of going back to MLK, Malcolm X, even the construct of Nelson Mandela. We have these civil rights history people. One of my favorites is Fannie Lou Hamer.
Mm-hmm.
These are civil rights activists who the only reason people felt like they would get over on them is the concept of them feeling like they could isolate these people. They could be, shall we say, for lack of a better term right now, offed, and not much would change.
Mm. Mm.
And that, for me, when we look at Stacey Abrams and our current leadership, people who are speaking, I've heard certain people say there's no leadership in the Black community. It's because they are not giving these people credence. So they can just be pushed aside, brushed off, and it won't matter. Whether they kill them physically or just in the public eye, our lack of support, our lack of voice allows it. One of the pieces in the show is called Lady Liberty of Sudan. It pulls out, it's a graphic piece, and it pulls out Allah Salah of Sudan, who spoke up during the Sudanese revolution. And I go over the printed piece with acrylic paint to pull her out as a Statue of Liberty, of course. Now, granted, that's not a comic book or an anime character, but it stands as some of our superheroes in our conscious. Mm-hmm. I am going after Ketanji Jackson. I am going after her, but thank you, Tess. And yes, I'm going after the Obamas as well. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to answer the comments in the question.
That's okay. Go ahead. That's fine.
Painting Allah Salah as a type of Statue of Liberty. One of the quotes over her head is, "It's not the bullet that kills the people. It is the silence of the people that kills." So when I say we have to collectively speak up, our ability to be as one, I am because we are, that unity, it is required for us to be successful as a movement. It is required that we have a collective voice that is strong. It is required that we have a collective voice that will be unyielding.
I want to shift over to Muse. Muse, I know you want to jump in. I wanted you to jump in and talk a little bit about some of the things that you see in the living, in the now, and the way in which you see that unfolding.
What I will, in regards to Stacey Abrams and the superheroes, or
the notion of social justice and the way in which we collectively are engaging currently in the now, particularly.
Yes. From my perspective, the fight for social justice, social equity, social equality, social inclusiveness, social diversity it looks a whole lot different, and it is indeed being televised. And so I think that as we, like you were saying when we were opening up, being able to imagine in a state of Afrofuturism, or, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, what that looks like, protesting won't look like our ancestors protesting anymore. You can make a video and get people fired for being racist now, right? You there will be, there are still elements of protesting that still will live on, but that'll evolve as well. The documentation of social justice is different. It's vast, it's moving quickly. People's lives change very, very quickly now, and it impacts the decisions that are being made when we assume that, we're powerless, or that we don't have a say in the matter. And so I think as we're going towards social justice, it heavily relays on our individual associations with liberation as well. And so what does liberation look like for Muse? What does it look like for Dr. Sis, Dr. Mako? What does it look like for Theresia? And then as we're going towards liberation, how does that work from our own individual liberation? How does that work for the collective's liberation? And how are we feeding into that? I don't know much about comic books. I know elements. I know the little pieces in the cartoons. However, going back to Captain Planet, right? Each individual had a gift, but when put together, it was on. And so that's kind of where I am in my own liberation. And then how can my personal liberation liberate the collective? Like how do I feed into that communal piece of it?
Well, I mean, I want you to think about using and deploying one of the things that you just said in terms of liberation. It's moving at a fast pace. It's changing. It's evolving. The way in which we deploy it. So are comics, and so are superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
Letty from Lovecraft Country. She's my superhero, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's so the revolution is being televised, streamed, and recreated.
Yes.
In a new way. The Watchmen, Regina Hall, my superhero, right? Mm-hmm. So, so the way in which superheroes they're coming to life, yes, out of the classic pages, certain Black Panther, and new versions of them are being written. Roxane Gay and Eddie Okorafor are writing new versions and have written new versions of female, particularly Black female superheroes. And this is the intersection, again, the confluence of literature and the way in which we see it manifesting in liberation activities. So one of the pieces, for example, of Nnedi Okorafor is all about immigration, right? And how is protesting and advocacy around immigration and transnational social justice issues, how are they being manifested? Well, she does that in a graphic novel called LaGuardia, right? And so you're absolutely right in that the ways in which the revolution is becoming manifest is different. And having an exhibit like this brings those together. Yeah,
absolutely. I would also like to, and I can be a little outside of the box when I'm thinking about forward movement, collective movement, Black women, and even in the ones that, and same with the civil rights movement, there are many, many, many names that we'll never know that were the fuel, the gas, the engine that kept that car running, right? And so right now, I'm not super old, I'm not super young either, but I'm just watching in amazement as the Black women that are coming up are, and Black men, right, are putting their hands back in the soil. They're growing gardens. They're getting back acquainted with their own spiritual base, whether it's Christian or otherwise, right? They have ritual practices, even if it goes all the way to, to voodoo, hoodoo, going back and learning what that looks like and matching it with scripture, like the old folks used to do, right? They're taking their spiritual practices very seriously. They have absolutely taken off the strong Black woman cape. I can't do it. and they're not
That
interested.
part.
And
And
using technology, right?
And using technology and getting into technology, securing the bag. So we're
yeah, securing the bag, right?
securing the bag, yes. And so they're securing the education, securing the bag. And even if they're opting out of education, if they're opting out of traditional relationships, traditional motherhood, that moves us. That's still some engine that's still some gas that is still keeping the engine moving. And so for me, those elements also play into social justice, because our bodies have been political playgrounds for so long. Now we're in a position, or our little sisters, our little nieces and cousins are in a position to say, nah, we good. Rest. I'm
Right.
protesting with rest. I'm
Absolutely.
taking a nap.
Exactly.
My hour lunch.
Right. Well, partially because I am just so mesmerized with the work of the Nat Ministry right now, and the whole movement to, dare I say, lean into some of the practices of not just like stillness, but being very hypercritical of the sort of the rhetoric of excellence, right? And there's something about excellence that is so deeply and profoundly for Black people tied to labor,
Yes.
productivity, and slaveocracy. And I think that there is so much resistance and power in stillness, a resistance to hyper productivity for the purpose of other people's metrics of success. And, what does it look like to envision a kind of superhero power that actually allows Black women to be still, to not always have to work extra hard, like constantly be working, grinding. Like, I would love my superpower to just be, I can nap on demand and people will leave me alone. That would be the best. I want to be able to just like be invisible so I can nap on demand and be left alone, right?
Rest is resistance. That's a whole, there's like a nap ministry I follow on Instagram. It's real. And I am so excited about it. I'm absolutely excited about what that looks like. And then the 2 years that we sat in solitude, we were still, what you were saying, Dr. Mako, we sat still. And I haven't pulled the stats, but I'm almost certain that Black women figured out a way. I know a few that figured out a way to feed their whole entire families, retire their husbands, and make a way, working way less, making way more than what they were doing with their degrees and all of that. And so that stillness allowed us to tap into that next level where my success or my excellence isn't tied to the nameplate on my door or on my desk or me getting a promotion or any of that. I can safely, what the thing that has been beautiful is it had an effect on how Black babies were born, right? Yeah. They're bigger, healthier, they holding their own heads up way sooner than usual, right? They're able to stay home they're able to do the whole 2 years, nurturing and pouring into that child now. And that generation of babies, I would love to see what that research looks like, because that is excellence. Being able to take to re-envision that making $1 out of 15 cents. And so, but now that 15 cents is now 1,500, 15,000, right? Yes. And I only worked maybe 3 hours this week to attain that. And I don't have to do anything else until the next quarter. Sorry.
No, I was saying, and on your own terms.
Yes.
The distinction.
Yes.
Pull back the periscope and see the way in which during the season of self, Black women have done it on their own terms, created spaces and professions and careers and entrepreneurial opportunities that have, yes, made them superheroes, but made them superheroes on their own terms, not on someone else's. That's part of when all the things were ripped away, right? When we said we want to survive, we want to thrive, but we're going to do it this way. And going back, I think of locals, Angie Brooks is doing this hands-on in the dirt aquaponic farming, married to Dr. George Brooks, right? One of our local superheroes. People sleep on him, all right? People sleep on her. She's a master gardener. She has taught people how to grow their own greens and how to grow their own food. And yet she's doing 3 other things on the side on her own terms. So think about, if you would, those kinds of women in our community who are still doing it. In terms of Afrofuturism, we have Mother Moore, who is also Rashida Phillips. Rashida Phillips is an attorney who fights for community-based equity in communities in Philadelphia that's been gentrified. All right, so they are imagining and reimagining their role, not only in their small circles, their small villages, their home, their own hearth, but reimagining their roles in the community in very practical ways, which is Afrofuturism at its best, and speculative imaginary at its best.
I would go as far as to argue, not even argue, maybe passionately debate that Black women that are in, corporate America, nonprofits, whatever, we attempt to infuse those organizations with our magic, with our futurism, with our, hey, if we just 10 minutes of this and we could, everybody can be off for the rest of the week. But it's such a, we're here. The effects of white supremacist, the layout and the association with work and labor and stress, it dims our light. And oftentimes we find ourselves in these corporate spaces where we're not able to flourish and shine, because for us, it's super simple, right? But the economic capital portion of work won't allow a simple process to be implemented. And so we're like, but COVID showed different. Well, on my own terms, like you said, Dr. Sis, on my own terms, I can implement this and we can take it, somewhere else. And now we have the job shortage issue. So
going back to this exhibit,
mm-hmm.
So that we don't get captured by the corporate capitalist white supremacists, because that's going to be there, unfortunately. I wish I could, like I tell my children, I wish I could say that it's going to go away in their generation. I don't think so. But these kinds of spaces and these kind of engagement, these kind of on your own term liminal spaces where we can reimagine is what I want to call you Dr. Reynolds. I'm putting that on you.
I actually wanted my doctorate for a really long time. It's coming, but not yet.
Okay, I want you to put the wanted in the parentheses and say want.
I want my doctorate.
Here we go. That comes straight from Toni Morrison. You want it. Put it in the parentheses.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
There is one thing I wanted to add to the conversation. When I was painting this show, and even when I talked to Madame Noir and I spoke at U of A about this show, part of what I spoke about is the fact that I haven't painted any of the characters for this show with smiles. That was intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want it to be about, oh, this task of being a superhero is so much fun. I wanted to illustrate the fatigue, and to illustrate the requirement for rest. And I wanted to call people of color, specifically Black people, and more specifically Black women, to rest. It is owed to us. It is a part of reparations. As I said before, Black excellence is not a flex, it is a survival tactic. We had to be excellent to survive, not just in slavery, in Jim Crow era, racism, the Reconstruction era. Every aspect of Black life on this continent has required excellence for survival. That is tiresome. That is literally living at a level of excellence 24 hours a day, 365. That is exhausting. And if you talk to any person of color, and specifically Black people and specifically Black women, most of them will say, I am tired. We are ancestrally tired. We are epigenetically tired. And I think rest as reparations is not something that can just be pushed past. It is literally owed for generations. So as Ebony was saying, as Muse was saying, taking our rest, taking our luxury, taking our Black boy joy, taking those spaces of I will rest, I will shut down, that 2-year period of, I don't have to do all of this. It's not just that was cute. It is what is owed to us, because we cannot continue to pour out excellence from an empty cup. If we are fatigued, if we are frazzled, if we are wore to the bone, that is what we will pour out. It may look excellent, but the underlying substratum of it will be absolutely wore out, fatigued, stressed, emotionally overtaxed. And that's what we give generationally.
I have a question. Dr. Ward, and come back to this also, John Muse. In the now, what are some ways in which we can, as we say, multiply ourselves, as we can spread not just the Black girl magic, not just the joy, but these kinds of spaces, these kinds of opportunities to exponentially increase? Muse, you talked about it being evolution in places that we may not see it any longer. Mako, Dr. Mako, what do you see? How do we, exponentially multiply this opportunity for others to experience Black joy? And where can we?
Right.
But I want to hear from others.
Well, I'm going to answer this and at the same time respond. There's a wonderful comment, question in the chat from S.R. Cowley, who's a social worker in the school system and wanting to know how to engage Generation Alpha. So my children are Generation Alpha. And I remember when my daughter was in preschool, they were introduced to a whole curriculum around finding language to best articulate the emotions that you are feeling right now. That the emotions aren't just happiness, sadness, and anger, that there's a whole range of emotions that children, that the school system has historically, particularly I'm thinking about my generation, Generation X, has historically, we failed to learn the appropriate language to communicate how we feel and how best teachers can adapt and respond to young people in those moments, right? And so, I'm not saying I'm the best parent by any stretch of the imagination. And my husband's probably right outside the door like this. However, one of the things we are very conscious of is making sure that our children feel safe and secure to express how they are feeling, and that they have the freedom to change their mind at any time. And that they also have the freedom and the wherewithal to know that they might be feeling one way now, but through a set of practices, deep breathing, meditation, walking meditation, a whole series of practices, they have the ability to change and feel the way they choose to feel. And I think that spending more time with young people, educating them about emotion and dialing in and being more articulate about how we express, how we feel in moments. As an adult, I find that we are constantly having to hide and mask. We can't show up for a whole host of historical reasons. We can never show up in our authenticity in the workplace, in public, right? We don't have the flexibility to show the range of emotions for fear that we as Black women will be pegged, the angry Black woman, or, oh, you're just so quiet and docile. We know what that means. No, that we have to be able to express and demand that we can show up in our full authenticity in ways that will be respected and honored. Because the reality is many of our colleagues show up in their authenticity all the time, and they are not having to kind of, manage the way that they feel, or they have the freedom and the empowerment to say, I'm not feeling in a particular way, so I'm not going to show up. They are empowered to step away from productivity in ways that I think as Black women, we are not empowered to do that. And so I think starting with having a deep and diverse language for how we feel, having the empowerment to express how we feel, and then knowing that through certain tools and practices, we have the power to shift how we feel. And I think, as Dr. Lester said in the chat, right, no is a complete sentence. We always have the power to say no and to exit stage left and go heal. That is always on, that option is always on the table all the time.
Youth?
I 1000% agree with everything Mako said. In my former life, I did a lot of behavioral health work with pregnant and parenting teen girls or teens that were aging out of the system and all of that. And what I will say, as we're impacting the generations coming up, what I will say is, do not sleep on the intellect of children. They are absolute geniuses by, I think the research is what, by 4, 5, absolute geniuses at very young ages. And what we do as adults, we wet blanket them with the power, with the pressures of the world that we experienced. And so in order for this to catch a fire, in order for this to be contagious, we have to keep our wet blankets to ourselves and allow sacred space, time and patience for our young ones to blossom and bloom. Yes, they're going to get it wrong. Yes, they may, act out and all of that. However, they're still developing. We're still nurturing. We're still pouring, regardless. Not to be without consequences, of course, but we can't forget that we were once them too. What did we need when we were them? Something happens after 30 where we just assume, I don't know what happened 29 and below. That wasn't me. I've been an adult all my life. And so I find it absolutely critical to remember, to not to negate their intellect and to remember that you were once them. And this is a different time. And oftentimes, sometimes when I'm sitting and reminiscing, it's like, dang, I wish I grew up in the 2000s. Like, this would be so dope. But then I also say that about the 90s too. That's what I'll say about that. I echo everything Mako said. And to add to the no being a complete sentence, I will say to Black women and to Black men, or anyone who feels stifled in their voice, you don't have to explain your no either. It's done. It's a dot. Walk away.
And that's a different paradigm, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to be in spaces where our no can be no and our yes can be yes, and all we are authentically. So not only do we not have to create spaces where we are not always explaining that, but also help shape the institutions to understand that. That's the reparations part, right? To help the institutions understand this. A question came from Angel Okra I saw as well. But one thing I do want to say, I want to invoke the name of Janelle Woods.
Yes, that's one of my mentors.
Oh, okay, great. She had this program that I worked with her before I left Phoenix. It was a Saturday school, and it took some of the gifts and artistry of the freedom schools and Saturday schools of the civil rights movement and brought them online. But it was a Saturday superhero school, and we were able to talk about superheroes and get Generation Alpha to talk about what the superheroes look like, and if you had powers, what would be your powers? And the conversations were amazing. And she may invoke that, and I believe she has a program, so I'm going to go ahead and put that out there too on Front Street, because it's a wonderful program. So look for Black Mothers Forum, the Saturday Superheroes program. Again, I'm always saying, well, how is it being lived out, and where are we finding those moments of jewels in our community? That's one of them. I want to bring back our artist to talk a little bit about her work around Flojo and Mandela. I didn't want to lose those. I'm monitoring the time, and I want to get to some of the other questions in Q&A. But let's talk about those other two pieces. Tell us about the piece, the Mandela piece.
This piece, President Nelson Black Panther Mandela was inspired by one of my other mentors, Dr. Praise Zinenga, who is a professor at U of A over the African American Studies program. And when I first told him I was painting the show and we were talking through it, he said to me, "You should paint Nelson Mandela as Black Panther." And I said, "No." So I'm just going to be honest about that. And he said, "Why not?" I said, "Nelson Mandela is too large. He cannot be capsulated in this character. The life, the work, the body, the mindset, the heart, all of it. Even though I adore the Black Panther character, it is not large enough for Nelson Mandela, at least in my heart." And he is from Zimbabwe. I have several friends from Nigeria. And all of them, and I have a friend from Liberia and Ghana, all of them who are from the home continent pressed me and asked me to paint this piece. And as I started the work, I realized part of it was not just that I thought he was too big, I thought I was too small. And it goes back to the concept of having to be excellent at everything that we do so that nothing you offer is good enough. And so when I was going through the process, I reimagined this piece, I want to say 10 times. Thank you.
I can see this piece. I mean, when I look at this, and I have to tell you, I hear the whole African national anthem, and then I hear the close. I hear Kosi Sikelele Africa, then I hear the close of Zowetu, Amandla. I mean, I hear the whole thing in this one image.
Thank you. And the crazy part is when I started painting it, I wanted to display Pan-Africanism.
And that's what it does.
Because when I went for the images that the triangles that go out this way, they culminate and there's this gathering at the coastline where we were stolen from, and they flow out to the sea. My reasoning for doing that was I wanted to be reminded in this piece that Nelson Mandela's voice, the reason why it's so large to me is it's a father's voice. When we heard him, those of us who are of the diaspora around the world heard home in his voice. We heard a father calling us, saying we were accepted, we were loved. It was like GPS for the soul. And in painting him, I painted him in the T'Challa figure in the foreground, but the Killmonger is in the background, because if you study Nelson Mandela's history, he was more of a Killmonger in his youth, and he became a T'Challa as he grew. I wanted to illustrate that even in the Martin and Malcolm piece, there is this line between our absolute militance and our pacifism, that there's a line between that we find our liberation in, and we find this place of peace when we can be free, as we were talking about early, to express our emotions, to express our rage, but also be honoring of ourselves, not to let ourselves be lost in bitterness.
I want you to remember that point, each of you that are here today. I want you to remember that point when y'all all run out to see Black Panther 2.
Right?
Here, because it comes back in the way in which they recreate T'Challa. Gonna leave it at that. No spoilers. I won't do it.
Right.
But
well, Sakina, I just wanted to add quickly, as you were talking, I was thinking about Black excellence as sacrifice, that we are constantly sacrificing our health, our well-being, our desire, because most of the things that we do for the sake of excellence, we don't fundamentally desire anyway. So there's all this sacrifice wrapped up in excellence. And it obviously it drew me back to the word, and it made me think about, right, Proverbs, right? To do what is right and just is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice.
Yeah.
And it for me, it feels like full circle, your conversation about Dr. King. And Dr. King essentially dying, not being a status quo figure. He has morphed into a status quo figure, but he did not live a life of status quo. He was not, he was popular with Black folks, but he was not popular in the US imagination when he was alive, because he did what was right and just. He did not, I mean, obviously his physical form was sacrificed, but he did not sacrifice what is right and just for, you know, some sort of notion of fame or popularity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
I think I saw someone just say so much of the social justice work is about sacrifice. Oh, Dr. Lester said that. And when you mentioned the scripture, it made me think all of the greatest social justice heroes that we know by name left this earth not having their flowers. And if we're going to the Bible, Jesus did not have an approval rating at all. And so it makes one think, you know, as we're talking about, you know, liberation and justice, it's not a matter of what you do that makes you famous or makes you immediately liked or put your name in lights and on a billboard, right? It may be you and your few three that are about that life, and that's it. And nobody else may know your name until 50 years after you're gone. But like the scripture said, doing what's just, doing what's right the first time, and because your heart is for the social justice piece, then you will ultimately live on, you know, through your legacy.
And I must say, both Muse and Mako, you're getting at, and you've gotten at the core of liberation thought. So when we talk about liberation thought today, we're invoking James Cone, Dolores Williams, Gustavo Gutierrez, and what they said was, we're going to throw out redemptive suffering. We don't have to suffer for redemption. You know, so suffering is not necessary. And my womanist mother, Dolores Williams, goes as far as to say, there's no redemption in the blood. You know, she goes that far. The reason she goes that far is because she said, we don't have to bleed to be pleasing to God. We don't have to give up because that's already been done, right? And so she really analyzes James Cone, of course, not only in his original work around Malcolm, his other work, Black Liberation Theology, but then his final work, one of his final pieces called The Cross and the Lynching Tree, where he re-examines this notion of Black suffering, right? And so you've really unpacked nicely the theoretical and theological underpinnings of liberation thought. Let me just say that to my sisters here. Thank you. Dr. Lester.
Oh my gosh, my gosh, my God. What a super panel this was, and what a conversation. Y'all kind of elevated all of us in this. And I wonder if part of this also is that and maybe tell me if this is correct, that we can be our own superheroes.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
That we can find them in ourselves. And I don't want to sort of invoke Mariah Carey, but there is something about being allowed to find the hero that is within us, because that's radical. That's part of that joy that is a choice. It's not an instinct, it's a choice. And that's the radical part. Oh my goodness, my goodness, my goodness. I feel like for those who do church, that we've had church tonight. That was my comment earlier.
Soul food meal.
That was my comment earlier when artist Therosia started preaching, and I was like, preach that word. I hear my pew buddy saying that, preach that word. And that's faith, or just a faith, not a specific faith system. This has been spectacular. I wonder if there are any questions out there that we didn't address, something wants to address before we sort of sign off? Because people were pretty active there. For my team members, did anybody ask any question that we need to address? Because you covered a lot of ground. And let me pause and make sure. Okay. I want us to make sure that we also know where I feel like we want to do a field trip over to the Mesa Museum so we can actually see the exhibit. So you're wearing one of the t-shirts, Sia.
Yeah, this is one of the shirts for the Soul Food and Superhero Show. We have 2 available now. There's going to be about, I think there'll be 15 of the shirt collection, but there'll be way more in the art collection itself. But this is number 2. This is the greatest, the Muhammad Ali piece, but the original piece is based off of the Nothing Strange About Stacy's Black Girl Magic.
Okay. Well, and what Project Humanities wants to do, oh, there we go. There's the model there. Yes, she not only our director, but also
I can join you on your field trip.
Yes, what we want to do is we want to get some of those shirts so that we can support, and we would love to have a field trip to go over as a group, sort of look. Yes. What we're going to do is we are going to ask people as they sign out to make sure that they give us their t-shirt size. We're going to choose a few of those t-shirts and then make sure you get them. It won't be exactly like Oprah where you get a car and you get a car and you get a car, but a few people will get t-shirts that we will choose based on those who may want them. So we want to do this to support the work of Ferocia, but also to sort of keep this movement and this moment going. I think this is a phenomenal panel. You see the kind of work that we're doing here at Project Humanities. We are bringing, and I said this earlier, I didn't see anybody comment, but it's not coincidental that we had a panel of women who are not often shown in terms of their heroism in these academic and community spaces. So I applaud you all for what you are doing and have done. And I want to remind you as you sign out, Project Humanities is doing good work. Some people would say excellent work. We do want your feedback, constructive feedback. We want you to go talk to somebody if you enjoyed this program. As my friend David Hemphill says at the Black Theater Troupe, if you really enjoyed something, go talk about it. If you didn't, just keep your lips sealed and let it between you and that. But we also want you to we want you to be reminded that we will be sending out a resource email to all of those who register. And you will be able to get some of the names and books that were referenced tonight. And we'll ask our panelists if they're absolutely foundational pieces that you should all know about. We will include that in the follow-up email. And then finally, please, 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 we started the top of the hour talking about this Humanity 101 pledge. This really is a conversation about humanity. It's about humanity and justice and representation and all of those principles we talked about: compassion, empathy, forgiveness, integrity, kindness, respect, and self-reflection. Feel free to sign our pledge if and only if you're willing to live those principles, to be better and to do better. That's what we're trying to do. So thank you, team members. What have I forgotten?
Yes, so just wanted to let everybody know, Nirav, if you can go to the next slide. If you want to express an interest in getting a t-shirt, that will actually be in our feedback form. So go ahead and follow this link, tinyurl/supersoul22. And that's where you can, at the very end of the survey, you can click, yes, I'm interested, and you can put your shirt size. And if you're drawn based off of that, then we'll get a hold of you.
And we'll figure out how to get it to you. But this, so that you can walk around with your superheroes t-shirt on and start that conversation and keep it going. Let's give our panelists and our moderator another round of applause. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, virtual pew people out there, for your engagement. And please, please look for our next program. I want to say it's on missing and murdered Indigenous women and two spirits that's coming up in about a week. So go to our website. On Tuesday? All right, in about a week. So we do good stuff, but we do good stuff that helps us all learn so that we can be better and do better. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll ask our panelists to hang on for just a couple of minutes so that we can do our final little picture. All right, thank you. Good evening, good night, good morning, good.
Thank you, everyone.